This is Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Now today's video is stitch number 6 in our Harmony sample blanket crochet along. And if you haven't been following along, don't worry, all the videos are on YouTube and you can catch right up. Now the stitches that we have done are the granny style stitch. We did V-stitches, we did cross stitches, bobble stitches, and then we did a simple shell. For stitch number 6, we're going to be doing what is called a block stitch. And it's very simple and gives a nice look. And it's a great addition to our blanket. Now all the stitches are what I would consider easy stitches. They're not beginner stitches, but they are easy stitches, and they're 12 of my favorite stitches to use in blankets. And so what we're doing is adding a stitch each month, and this is our 6th stitch, the block stitch, and then we have 6 more stitches to go. Now the pattern, if you do it according to the pattern that I have done, it's going to measure about 25 by 25, which is a really small blanket, but it's a great size for a baby or a dog. But if you want to make the pattern wider, go to video number 1 and it will explain to you how to make the pattern larger from the beginning. And of course, to make your pattern longer, you just add more rows of each of your stitches that you would like. All right, let's talk about what you're going to need to continue on with our blanket. For today's video and all the videos for the Harmony sample blanket, we are using an H hook. An H hook is an H8, which is a 5mm crochet hook. And if you've chosen to use a bigger crochet hook, make sure that you use the same size throughout your blanket so that your gauge and your tension remains the same. You're going to need your scissors because we're going to be changing colors a little bit. You'll need your needle for weaving in your ends. And then for yarn, I'm using all solid colors of yarns. I'll be using 3 different colors today. And they're all worsted weight number 4 yarns. You can use Red Heart Super Saver, I love this yarn, Vanna's Choice, or anything that you have on hand. I'm basically just working through some of my leftover colors so I can make a colorful blanket. You can use variegateds if you want to. You can add those in. It's your blanket. You can even do the whole blanket in just one color. It's totally up to you. The purpose of doing a blanket like this is to learn some new fun stitches. Now, you can make this blanket in cottons, but make sure that you continue to use cotton throughout your project. These are the 3 colors that I'm using. I'm using a blue, a cream, and a brown. All right, let's get started on the block stitch. Here's my blanket that I've been working on with you. Here's my foundation row, my granny stitch rows. Then we did a row between and a couple of V-stitch rows, row between, cross stitch rows, row between, and then we did a couple of rows of our bobble stitches. We did a row between, and then I did the simple shells. And now we're ready to add a row in between before we start our block stitch row. Now, I do recommend that as you work, that when you finish each stitch, or each row of stitches, I should say, that you go ahead and weave in your ends. If you don't, it could get away from you and you'll have a whole bunch of ends that you'll have to weave in. But be sure and leave your loop from your last row so that we can add our new color in when we go to begin our next stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and add in this brown yarn. And I'm using this brown yarn as my row of stitches between this row of shell stitches and our next rows when we learn the block stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my yarns across so that I can stitch over them, and I can come back and weave those in later. Alright, so we're going to begin with only a chain 1. That's because we're going to be stitching a row of single crochets across. And what we're going to do is just place 1 single crochet in each of the stitches across. So I'm holding those yarn tails across. I'll go right in that first double crochet and stitch a single crochet. In a single crochet, we go in the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, and go through both loops. And what we've been doing on our blanket is in between each new stitch, we stitch a row of stitches. This row is a single crochet. Sometimes we stitch a half, and sometimes we stitch a double. So it's just whatever fits best with this row. Alright, so I've stitched over a few of those yarn tails, and we're just going to push those to the back, and then we're going to continue stitching 1 single crochet in each of the stitches across. So I've stitched in those first 4 stitches, and then I stitched in those 3 double crochets of our shell stitch, and I'm going to continue that across this row. And this is going to give us a nice foundation for our next stitch, which of course is our block stitch. So I'm going to continue this across, stitching 1 single crochet in each single crochet across. I completed the single crochet in each stitch across, and I'm going to go ahead and clip my yarn because I'm finished with my brown yarn. I'm going to join in the cream, and I'm just going to chain 1, and then I'm going to turn my work. All right. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is stitch 1 single crochet in the first 4 single crochets. One thing I want to remind you about when changing colors is make sure that you do the chain 1, 2, or 3 or whatever you're doing for the next row after the color change, or you end up with 1 stitch that's the wrong color. Alright, so let's go right in that first stitch and stitch a single crochet, and you'll notice again I'm stitching over those tails of yarn, and it just makes it easier to weave those in later. So I'm stitching 4 single crochets. After I've stitched those first 4 single crochets, I'm going to chain 3. Then I'm going to skip the next 2 single crochets and single crochet in the next stitch. And then I'm again going to chain 3. I'll skip the next 2 stitches and single crochet in the next. And what we're doing here, get those out of the way, is we're making these chain 3 spaces in order to stitch our block stitches in. So I'm going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. There we go. Skip the next 2 and stitch a single crochet. And this is the way the pattern will work for this row. Chain 3, skip 2, and single crochet in the next. Chain 3, skip 2, and single crochet in the next. Chain 3, skip 2, and single crochet in the next. And we will repeat this all the way across this row, and then in those last 4 stitches we'll stitch 4 single crochets, 1 in each of the last 4. I've completed those stitches, single crochet, chain 3, skip 2, all the way across, and now I'm to those last 4 single crochets, and so we're just going to place a single crochet in each of those last 4. We're going to be changing colors again, so we're going to clip our cream colored yarn, and I'm going to bring in my blue. This time we're going to chain 3. And this chain 3 counts as our first double crochet. And now I'm going to turn my work. And we're going to place a double crochet in the next 3 because this first chain 3 counts as a double crochet. All right, yarn over, go in the stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over, and go through the second 2. That's our double crochet. All right, so now I have those first 4 double crochets for the edge of our blanket. Now, to form the blocks, what we're going to be doing is stitching in this chain 3 space that we made. So what we're going to do is stitch 3 double crochets in each of these chain 3 spaces. Yarn over, go in the chain 3 space, and stitch a double crochet. And we'll put 3 double crochets in that chain 3 space. And that's what we'll do all the way across. We'll just stitch 3 double crochets in each of the chain 3 spaces. And you can see that it forms little blocks. So it's really quite simple. 3 double crochets in each of the chain 3 spaces across. I completed the row of blocks or block stitches, which is 3 double crochets in each of the chain 3 spaces. Now I'm to those last 4 stitches, and we're just going to place 1 double crochet in each of those stitches. All right, we're going to cut our yarn again, and we're going to bring back in our cream colored yarn, or whatever color that you like. You can do these in different colors. I'm just going to go ahead and stick with the cream and blue. Alrighty, so I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. Alright, now we're going to stitch over those yarn tails again. Just helps us out when it comes to weaving those in. Alright, so I'm going to go right in that first single crochet and stitch a single crochet, and then we'll stitch 1 in each of those next 3. So we have 4 single crochets at the beginning of our row. Alright, so now we need to make those chain 3 spaces again. And the way we do that is we're going to single crochet between the last double crochet and the next double crochet of our block stitch. Then we'll chain 3. and we'll stitch a single crochet between the block stitches. Just go around and stitch your single crochet and chain 3. And this is the way this row will work, because we're setting up for our next row of block stitches. So we chain 3, we're going to single crochet between the next 2 block stitches and chain 3. Single crochet between the next 2 block stitches and chain 3. This is the way we'll work this row across. Single crochet, chain 3, single crochet between the next 2 block stitches and chain 3, single crochet between the next 2 and chain 3 all the way across this row. And like I said, we're just setting up so we can do our next row of block stitches in these chain 3 spaces. I continued to stitch the chain 3 single crochet between the next block stitch all the way across, and now I'm to those last 4 stitches, so I'm going to stitch 1 single crochet in each of those last 4 stitches. And I'm going to cut my yarn. And now I'm going to do another row of the block stitches in the blue. Join my yarn in and chain 3. And turn my work. Our chain 3 again counts as our first double crochet. So I'm going to double crochet in the next 3 stitches. And again, I'm working over the yarn tails. There's those first 4 double crochets. And now I'm going to be stitching 3 double crochets in each of the chain 3 spaces like we did on this row. So, and if you did your rows right, your block stitches will line up to the previous block stitch. Alright, so all we're going to do is stitch 3 double crochets in each of the chain 3 spaces. And see how that lines up? Your block stitches are on top of each other, and your single crochets in between are in between. So I'll just work this row across, stitching 3 double crochets in each of the chain 3 spaces. Working all the way across this row till I reach those last 4 double crochets. I completed that second row of block stitches. Now I'm going to stitch 1 double crochet in each of those last 4 double crochets. And then what we need to do is weave in all these ends, but make sure, whether you're doing more rows or less rows, that you go ahead and make a nice big loop so that we can continue on our next stitch. All right, let's weave these ends in. One thing that we did is we stitched back over some of them, and some of them that we didn't. Those that we stitched over are a lot easier to weave in. We'll just thread that on there, go up a stitch, try to stay within the color so it doesn't show through too much. And I like to go one way, and if I have enough yarn, go back the other way. And I try to go through stitches and fibers that's going to hold that, and then clip it. And another thing, when I'm doing a blanket, I don't want to end up with my yarn sticking out on this end, just because it makes it just a little bit harder to make a trim around the edge. So here I've got a nice long white cream one. And I'm going to try to stay in the cream. I'm going to go that way. I'm going to go up a stitch and come back this way. But I don't want to leave my yarn and cut it here. So I'm going to turn again and go back this way. And that will just help it, like I said, make it easier to add a trim. Also, there we go. I really recommend that you take the time and go ahead and weave in all these ends when you can, instead of waiting to the end of the blanket, because it can be overwhelming to have a whole bunch of ends to weave in. So when you finish however many rows that you want to for this stitch, just go ahead and take a couple minutes and weave in those ends. So that's how you stitch a block stitch. I really love the stitch. I love to contrast it with two colors, and it really is a lot of fun, and it's a great blanket stitch and can be used for lots of other crochet projects as well. Now next month we will be doing the basket weave stitch, so be sure and tune in for stitch number 7.